Mark and Rich, I might direct this next one at you. So, unfortunately, as we've all seen, there's been a recent rise in gun violence, especially as we're emerging out of this COVID lockdown. And just wanted to hear your thoughts on how your industries, in particular, being in the education space, have been impacted by that recent rise.
Rich, go ahead. I'll yield to you.
Okay, sure. Um, I think, security is not limited just to technology. I think we need to have the technology there. It has to be integrated. But I think what really happens in the neighborhoods is very critical. What type of events are happening? Um, Parents can be very fearful about their kids walking to school, especially if they're, say, for example, I had a situation where elementary students were walking past a high school and they were really worried about the safety of their kids. So I think one of the things is to just have that the platform in place, have that communication system open so that parents, the schools, the administrators, the principals, they all have a good handle on the climate and the culture of that particular neighborhood or area. I think that being aware of that, I think is pretty much the most critical piece. Because once you have that communication in place, you're going to be able to get a heads up on if any trouble is going to come to the school. And then when the trouble comes to the schools, that's when, exterior, interior cameras and, all of the other biometrics for entry, that takes place, but at least you have a heads up as the traffic that's coming into your school.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think the component here of having the technology supporting the other efforts on campus is super important. The reality is that we know, gun violence unfortunately continues to be on a rise in this country. Washington Post recently had an article within the last couple of days talking about how 2020 was really a bad year for gun violence, and 2021's on an upward trend to beat 2020. I think we have to know what's going on around us. We have to know what's going on within our communities, and also what's happening on our campuses. And I think the expectation there is that these families and friends have loved ones on our campuses, and it's not lost on us that these are the most important things on our campuses are the people, right? And the reality is that many campuses are waiting until there's a crisis to address their shortcomings, and we need to be really proactive in making sure that we have those systems in place that can help expedite notifications and safety protocols, and expedite emergency response in an appropriate way that allows us to protect our people, which frankly is the most important thing on our campuses.
Yeah, I think one of the key things, if I might add, is right to your point, Mark and Rich. I mean, how do you get ahead of the situation? And I always, bring up the movie Minority Report. Where you have pre-crime, you have the ability with these precogs to be able to see things before they actually happen. So, how do we as a safety community get ahead of those threats and prevent them rather than reacting once something does occur? That's the real $1 million question. How do we get ahead of that?
No, thank you for adding that, Ara. And actually, kind of to piggyback off of that last question, but maybe to broaden it a little, I'd love to hear more from Mark and Rich on, your thoughts on why campus security is so important in general.
Sure. To go with Ara's question, in a school district, I was in a school district that was pretty rough. And what we did to get inside information, if you will, was we actually had some people in the neighborhood that had small contracts and had a beat on the community. And they would let us know if there was trouble coming to school that way.
I think for us, the reality is that you know, every geographic location is different, and I think the reason it's so important for us, and having worked on a couple of different types of campuses, I think the reality is that we have got to make sure that that again, that the people are safe, that we are doing everything we can in our power to educate those people within our community. And the reality is we're not just talking about students, right? We're talking about students, faculty, staff, visitors, guests, vendors, community members. You know, I happen to be on a campus now where it's not uncommon to walk outside and see 10, 15 community members just walking through campus. We have that kind of an open campus. And again, you know, you've got to look at your specific location and your specific needs and the community you're within, and make sure that you've got those things in place, not only on campus, but off campus. I mean, the relationship building off campus with those people that are going to be servicing your needs in the event of an emergency. I mean, those relationships need to be built at a time. And, you know, I think immediately about the first responders that are going to come to campus, but even beyond that, I think the relationships you build with technology sector, people like Telos and Omnilert that are able to give us the insight on what the newest and the best is out there, and being able to think about how we can apply that, and having the relationships with vendors who can help me to learn about those areas I don't know about. I mean, the reality is it's a daily journey for me to learn about what's new out there, what can I do differently, and that's what one of the things that's great about campus security as a whole is that it's an entity in and of itself where I can tap on the shoulder of the campus next door to me, or across the city, or across the state, across the country from me, to find out what they're doing and how I can learn and how we can become better. There's just a lot of information out there, and having really reliable partners in the technology sector is super important to be able to understand what can we improve upon.
To go back to something that was mentioned earlier, I think social media and general cloud policies are something that really need to be part of a district's DNA. For example, the monitoring of Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, IA products like Alexa, Siri, Google. I think these are, you know, there are a lot of things that people put on the internet, and to have a, you know, a dedicated team, not only for the physical security and data security, but also having strong policies in place as to who owns the data, who has access and update, you know, Active Directory type profiles, who can create and distribute this information, who controls it, what's the reason for, you know, you can go down the list of, you know, having strong policies of data policies, data security policies, like, you know, yearly signatures of teachers, students, and parents to be able to access systems, what's allowed on the network, these type of things like that, that they all kind of form a network, a web of information, if you will. And, you know, this is part of that holistic approach, Ara, that you were speaking about, you know, that there are a lot of pieces. You've got to have a sponsor, that someone is in charge, that has the, you know, has the political power within the organization to make decisions, and has budget, so that you can really start to address what's coming into school, what's happening within school, and then what's happening after school. And you brought up another point about, you know, the blended learning, the virtual learning, hybrid learning. You know, that just it complicates the issues. So to have a group in an organization that is focused on all the security, you know, having a CISO, for example, we did that in Loudoun County because we had a breach. And this was to get everybody together, get all the securities together. And I think, you know, when you have that, you have a face, you have a name, you have a budget, and you have some power there, political power, to be able to make those kind of decisions.
Yeah, so actually, I think that's a great segue to this next question that I was going to ask, because we had prior to that focused so much on physical security, and I'm glad you brought up the data security as well. Tom, this one's for you. What cybersecurity challenges are campuses and other facilities facing?
Yeah, great. So, as these campus security solutions are deployed, cybersecurity challenges clearly need to be considered. As many are painfully aware, campuses and facilities and organizations of all kinds are seeing unprecedented increase, right, in critical criminal cyber activity. Security Magazine, for example, states there's over 2,000 cyber attacks a day. FBI reported over a 300% increase in cyber attacks since March of last year. And we're seeing, every day news of major critical infrastructure and ransomware attacks. In fact, this time last year, organizations were about 3 months into a major effort to provide remote connectivity to the majority of their workforce due to the pandemic. And by all accounts, those efforts by educational, healthcare, financial, and corporate organizations were successful from a productivity perspective. However, all these new VPN type connections created millions of new cyber attack vectors for criminals. And criminal cyber activity soared, and it's not letting up. So as these new critical capabilities, such as visual gun detect and alert solutions, are added to campus networks, new ways of protecting these critical assets need to be adopted. Ara mentioned before that a number of different technologies are integrated into these solutions, providing different types of capabilities. Those components of these new types of solutions need to be completely hidden from view of the public internet in order to ensure cybersecurity.
Well, on that note, and Elizabeth, you asked if you've been asking about physical security, and the reality is, as more things move to the cloud, that's when the risk gets exponentially greater when it comes to risk, when it comes to cybersecurity and access to data. And one of the things that we talk about, so the physical security stuff, and taking a preventative approach to safety. One of the new technologies that we're working with right now is that we recently launched is gun detection using surveillance cameras on a campus, right? But the thing is, though, you've got campuses have thousands of cameras quite often, and you can't have somebody monitoring all the cameras all the time. So when you utilize artificial intelligence to monitor the cameras, looking for weapon detection, and then taking action from that's critical. But much of that infrastructure is in the cloud, and so the potential of having that stream, that connectivity compromised, or the camera is compromised because of an external hack, is elevated when you have a cloud-based system, and that's where what Tom was mentioning, that becomes even more relevant, because you cannot afford to have your security systems be compromised by external threats.
Yeah, so I know that we touched on this a little bit already with you, Marc and Rich, but now that we're focused on that data security topic, I'd love to hear more specifics on how your industry has been impacted by data security issues.
I think a couple of things. There's a school district in Virginia that was hit with a ransomware attack, and around the country, there are a number of ransom attacks. And as school districts, for budgeting, and expenditure reasons, are not building their own data centers anymore. They're outsourcing that data to these large corporations. So say, for example, you're using an AI tool like Siri or, excuse me, Alexa, Google. The question is, all that's in the cloud, right? So what policies do you have in place that protect students, teachers, parents, administrators? All the data that's on that system is somewhere. Now, where is it? It's very difficult to know. And the question is, when they download something, say, for example, on a mobile device, what's the security level on those mobile devices? Is there endpoint security, intrusion, things that could be wormholes where hackers can get into that information and, just basically, steal it and use that as a ransomware attack. So I think when you really have to look at who owns the data on the device. So a mobile device that's using one of those AI apps that I was speaking about, and you loaded, say, for example, all of your student information on it. Well, where is that information? Where is it backed up? Is it only on that single device? And some of the backups, because of redundancy, could be in multiple data centers. So this is what school districts are very concerned about. Once the decision was made not to rebuild data centers for schools and to outsource that to the cloud, we have a whole new set of issues that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree. I think the challenge for us has been, the reality is that, this pandemic has caused us to move to more online interactions. There's more data available online. It's more vulnerable. It's more accessible. The transient nature of campuses is that you have a lot of people coming and going, either graduating or leaving the institution, coming back to the institution. I think it's caused us to really think about how we have a security team in place, and we have those external vendor partners that are allowing us to really look closely and critically at the way we do business and the infrastructure that we have in place to prevent some of these exposures that we've had. Illinois has been susceptible to a lot of online access of data that has caused an increase in claims for unemployment, for example, which has become a huge headache across the state for so many people. But that's just one example of where, we had to look really closely at, how well are we securing our data? How much are we putting out there voluntarily? How much are we restricting access to? And, what services and software do we have to help prevent the leakage of that information out to the general public? And I think, just society in general has moved to living so much of their life online that we just have to be all that much more in tune with what are we doing to prevent, inexcusable, really, data leakage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Ara, outside of cybersecurity and data security, what are some of the limitations of existing physical security technologies?
Well, interesting enough, it's not really the technology, and like Rich mentioned, technology is a tool. It is a tool. It's not the be all end all. And so, like any tool, the expertise of the human utilizing the tool is critical for the effectiveness to be realized from whatever the tool is. And so, one of the big issues is humans. Human nature. One of the things that we learned with Omnilert years ago, that when there was an active shooter on campus, the dispatcher, the individual who was responsible for sending out an emergency notification to lockdown campus, was obviously, as you can imagine, under duress, full, pumped with adrenaline. Anxiety was through the roof, and would often, and this is going back years ago, type in a message and maybe have errors in the message, not send it to the right people. And that the results of that were catastrophic in some situations, and obviously not optimal. So one of the things that we introduced many years ago now was the ability to automate action. So if there is a lockdown, and I know Marc has experienced this at Elmhurst, if there's a need to lock down campus, rather than figure out what you need to say, who needs to be notified, what resources do we need to mobilize, what procedures do we share with different groups with the campus community, you have all of that predefined, preloaded in a scenario. So when the time comes that you do need to lock down campus, I know Mark is an Apple Watch user. I mean, you could just launch a lockdown from your watch, your mobile device, a desktop computer, and within a matter of seconds, every student is notified. Staff, faculty, resources are notified. The police and first responders are mobilized and requested to come to campus. The website has a message that says, "We are under lockdown. Please do not approach campus." And more information will follow. Facebook, Twitter, all your social media websites are automatically updated. But the point is, this all happens within a matter of seconds, and the content, what happens, who's notified, etc., is all planned out in advance and launched simultaneously. So that takes out the human error aspect when it comes to the technology, because the technology is there, it's already there, but how do you mitigate the human factors with that? One of the other aspects with this is, once again, the human, I mentioned before, the gun detect technology. So campuses, I was on the campus at UCF down in Orlando a few years ago, and was amazed. I think they had 3,000 cameras, throughout the campus, and a massive video wall. But how are you going to be able to, how is any human or multiple humans going to be able to monitor all of those simultaneous feeds to identify a potential threat like a firearm? And typically, part of the transition is utilizing surveillance cameras from a forensic tool to do after the incident research and identify what happened because it was caught on video, to a prevention tool. And so that's one of the aspects that I would also offer. So going back to the whole human limitation thing, we can only monitor so many feeds simultaneously, utilizing artificial intelligence, machine learning to keep an eye on what's happening. So then, if there was a firearm detected on campus at Elmhurst University, Mark could verify it and then initiate that lockdown scenario, automate the entire response, and keep people out of harm's way proactively.
Ara, I just want to underscore something that you said, which is that, we pride ourselves here at having really experienced and well-trained individuals working here that have worked here and have worked as emergency responders elsewhere. The reality is that when we had our most recent lockdown event, it was an active shooter situation, we learned really quickly that all of us, myself included, we're struck with that momentary, like, okay, this is really happening. We've got to do something. What do I need to do next, right? Fortunately, we have staff that, kind of come back to their senses pretty quickly. And I want to underscore the fact that everybody experiences that. That's not just the lay person who's never done emergency response. But the reality is all the steps that happened after that are quite numerous. A lot of things you have to remember. I had experienced dispatchers working, experienced officers on the streets. The reality is that the ability to have systems in place that make sure that all the boxes are being checked in terms of notifications and people are being notified, that the systems are being operated and implemented in a very procedural way is hugely helpful in a moment of crisis, because the reality is your mind is going in 300 different directions, and having systems that allow us to be able to have one button activation and mass notifications to all of the appropriate individuals is hugely helpful with making sure that we're doing what we need to do to notify our campus community. The reality is that is the expectation, right? The expectation by the end user is that they are receiving timely notifications from the people that are able to make those notifications. And if we're not prepared to do that, we're opening ourselves up to a lot of criticism. And if we're lucky, it's only criticism. If it's not, it's lives, right? We're talking about the safety of people and individuals in their lives. And so I just want to underscore how important it is to really be thinking about what you have in place in terms of infrastructure in advance of that need.
Thank you for that. Tom, do you want to weigh in on some of the use cases for the integration of cybersecurity technologies and physical security technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of the things that Mark was just talking about and Ara and so on, I mean, they're so critical to have that type of capability on these campuses, whether it's an education campus or healthcare campus or whatever. Protecting those solutions, though, from cybersecurity concerns is absolutely key. And some of the data and information security issues that Mark and Rich were talking about before are based on traditional IT network security, which is primarily focused on securing the network edge and endpoint user devices like laptops and mobile devices and tablets and so on. When you start adding physical devices, when the cyber and physical domains collide with the deployment and integration of IP-based physical assets like IP cameras and medical devices and manufacturing equipment, energy, oil and gas sensors, and smart building technologies, and so on, that's when things get more complicated, right? And you need to take a look beyond typical IT network security. So these physical assets protect critical infrastructure and are used in support of critical capability solutions like visual gun detection. And they need to be secured in such a manner that they can't even be seen by cyber criminals. Traditional network security solutions can't hide assets. There's been technologies that have been in use for years by intelligence and military operations, such as virtual network obfuscation. And these technologies are now being commercialized for other markets and can provide the necessary protection to eliminate cyber attack surfaces of the type that have allowed attacks recently, like the Verkada video system that was hacked into, that allowed a hacker to go in and take a look at the video streams, manipulate the cameras, go into the server where all of the data that was being collected and so on. Or the Colonial Pipeline hack that happened just recently, or the JBS food supply hack. These things, the more physical devices that are digitized and connected to traditional IT networks, the more we need to be looking at non-traditional or new ways of protecting those networks so that the types of capabilities that Ara and Mark and Rich are talking about, from protecting students and personnel within these campuses, can stay running, that they can run all the time, that the video cameras are always in operation, and that they can't be hacked. And the reason they can't be hacked is that these technologies actually hide IP addresses, so that hackers can't even see that video cameras exist. So these technologies are available today, and they could be used to augment traditional security solutions to protect those assets most critical to an organization or a person or even a nation.
So I think, the approach up until this point has very much been more of a reactive one when it comes to security. And I think what we're starting to see with some of these new technologies is the ability to really look at security, from a more proactive standpoint. So maybe Ara, would you like to weigh in on some steps that can be taken to transition from that reactive to proactive mentality?
Sure. I mean, it really, there are a number of different aspects, and it starts with the humans again. So it goes back to knowing what to do, right? Knowing what to do if there's a situation, being confident in what to do. So training, being prepared. We were chatting a little earlier. Our good friend at Navigate 360 always, Brandon Rowan always, brings up, everyone knows what to do if you're caught on fire. But does everyone know what to do if there's an active shooter situation? And so making sure that we develop muscle memory on what to do in this situation. It's a new threat. I mean, I know when we had bomb shelters for a nuclear attack when I was in elementary school, when many of us were, that was a major threat then, and we have new threats today that we can address. So, the having the knowledge, knowing what to do, being prepared, having procedures documented. I got my binder back here, but I'm sure everyone has a binder, emergency procedures binder, and taking those procedures, thinking them through, and like I mentioned before, and automating those procedures for lockdown, for active shooter, chemical spill, gas leak, whatever those things are, have all of those actions predefined, loaded into your emergency notification system, like Omnilert. And when something does happen, then you can automatically initiate those series of actions, those procedures, automate the whole thing, take out the human emotional element of it. But even before that is utilizing artificial intelligence, utilizing technology once again to aid us humans in identifying potential threats. So utilizing, you already have security cameras almost, I think, every school, every campus, every manufacturing center, every building in this country has surveillance cameras already there. They already exist. You're not buying anything new. But adding the video analytic element to that, to be able to detect a firearm, to prevent a situation. So you identify the threat, you automate the response, people are made aware of the situation, and they know what to do because they're prepared for it, and they're providing information that provides some direction. So I think those are really the key aspects to that, Elizabeth.
That's really helpful. So it does actually look like we are getting quite a few questions coming in. So I think maybe we'll transition now to open it up to those questions from the audience. And let's see, this first one here, and feel free to continue to submit them through the Q&A here. But this first one, I know that we focused quite a bit on education in particular, but really campuses, can mean all sorts of things. And this question is, how can this technology be integrated into stadiums and arena style facilities? Maybe Ara and Tom, you want to take that one?
Yeah, Ara, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward. I mean, most every stadium and facility, entertainment venue. In fact, I was just a few years ago, I was at the Metropolitan Opera at Lincoln Center in New York. They're using Omnilert, and when you know it, I mean, just a couple weeks after I left, they had to lock down. Somebody attended a concert, a performance of the opera with a bag of a powder and sprinkled the powder over the orchestra pit. And you could imagine the potential of biological agents, and ended up being the ashes of the person's close friend. But the point is, they initiated a lockdown, evacuated the facility, etc. So if you have cameras in your facility, a stadium, you can add the Omnilert gun detect, AI visual gun detection to the existing network, and it will operate like any other environment.
Yeah, that's great, Ara. And any place that uses a video surveillance system, which is the majority of any large venue, right? Whether it's a sports venue, it could be a healthcare campus, it could be a military base. Integration of the Omnilert capability with the security backing it can be implemented in those locations regardless, right?
For sure. And this next one kind of takes a different turn. So there has been, from what I've observed, and so I think this question is very relevant, some concerns about AI as it relates to, civil implications, specifically with facial recognition and being used in that way. So the question is, would love to hear any comments about the potential use of technologies such as AI and predictive analytics in the use of profiling and identification of potential future shooters, as well as the social and civil implications of using such technology in this manner. And feel free, whoever wants to take that one on. Ara, I know you and I personally have had some conversations about it, but anyone else that wants to weigh in, feel free to do so as well.
I mean, this is a big deal, and this is going to be a bigger deal because you have new technology that utilizes artificial intelligence and video analytics to identify behaviors, identify physical characteristics, identify faces, identify firearms and other objects. And so having a framework around that protects civil liberties of individuals, I think is an important factor. And this is something that we're just starting the conversation now, and it will certainly continue as video analytics and artificial intelligence tends to expand a little bit more frequently. But in the instance with the gun detection and Omnilert's technology, we do not use facial recognition. We're not looking for physical characteristics of the individual. What the artificial intelligence looks for, number one, it identifies the firearm, and it's constantly learning new weapons every single day. That's part of the learning process, and that gets distributed to all of the neural network, if you will, of sites that are using the technology. Secondly, it looks for a range. It looks for people. So it is also looking for is this a person or is it sitting on a desk? But also looks for a range of motion. So if Marc walks in the room with a holstered pistol, it will not identify that as a firearm and initiate any sort of notification until he pulls it out, and then it identifies the range of motion as being one that would be used in a potential threat. So those are issues that as an industry we are going to be tackling, and I know we're in the process of launching a new industry organization called Zero Now, which is all about preventing harm on campuses and schools. And certainly AI bias through technology is going to be one of the issues that we are going to be discussing in the upcoming year, and looking forward to having those discussions with everybody.
Yeah, and Ara, just to expand on that, and there's video surveillance solutions all over the place anyway, right? What your AI capability is doing, and you and I have talked about this a number of times, is it's providing those extra couple of minutes or few minutes, right? That could save lives. So if you have this kind of capability within an existing video surveillance environment, and you can identify that there is an active gun issue in the process, just getting that extra few minutes is so extremely valuable, right?
Well, even seconds, even an additional 30 seconds, you have a 30-second head start to initiate your run, hide, fight, Alice procedures, whatever those lockdown procedures are that you have adopted. 30 seconds is an eternity. And what's interesting, and one of the leading cause of death from mass active shooter situations is loss of blood. And so if you can initiate EMT to arrive on your location within seconds of identifying that firearm, they're initiated, that can make that alone can make the difference between life and death in a situation, because EMT arrives, and it's usually probably at least 5 to 10 minutes earlier, because by the time you do call 911, by the time you do request help, the situation is already unfolded and the firearm has been discharged at that point. So getting that early notification, that early head start, makes a significant difference. You're right, Tom.
Yeah, the one thing that I would see with this is that would be an anonymous bad actor. There are visitor entry systems that tap into the state and federal database. So those are not anonymous actors anymore. We know who they are. So I think maybe the next step is some kind of hybrid of anonymous and non-anonymous actors that we can kind of create an environment where we have a rapid result. Not only that we have a shooter, but that we also have a way to connect that with a database that's a federal database around the country that could help us, minimize the impact.
Mm-hmm. And Marc, this next one is for you. It says, how many surveillance cameras do you have at Elmhurst, and do you use video analytics?
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of onboarding this new solution, that the gun detect solution that's been brought forward, and we are looking to kind of bring it on to a few key locations on our campus. As obviously we're in the summer, our campus population is down significantly. We do have a lot of external rentals and campers that are on campus. So we're trying to bring this on now so that we can get this up and running in its full capacity by the time students start returning en masse to campus. Currently, we have about 110 cameras. We're in the process of putting in somewhere around 35 more. So we're in flux somewhere between 110 to 145 cameras that will be on campus within the next 30 days. And then from a view standpoint, so we have multiple cameras that have multiple views. So I'd say right now we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 125 views off of 110 cameras. We look for that to increase to about 175 views after our current installation is completed.
Okay, thank you for that. And Tom, can someone hack into and monitor a surveillance system if they have the IP address? What about cloud-based video management system? Would they work with Telos Ghost?
Yeah, so there are a number of organizations that are deploying large video surveillance capabilities and video management systems where either cameras connect directly to cloud-based repositories or connect to a back-end server that then in turn goes to an analytics platform. There are levels of security built into all of those environments. However, whenever there's an IP-based device sitting out on the public internet, that is available to a hacker. So the intent of these new technologies is to be able to put an obfuscation network in between those devices and the network that you're operating on, so that as data traverses through that network, source and destination IP addresses are removed, so that no activity coming from that endpoint device can be attributed to it.
Okay. Tom, this one's for you as well. How is Telos Ghost different from a VPN?
So a VPN technology, there are a couple of different types of VPNs, of course. The typical corporate VPN is a point-to-point from the edge of a network to a remote device. And it's a single connection. It does provide levels of security using TLS encryption. However, it doesn't hide the IP addresses of the network edge or the endpoint. So operating out on the public internet, connecting to a corporate enterprise has its vulnerabilities. The other type of a network that is somewhat more secure, another type of VPN is you probably heard of an anonymous VPN. There are a number of those. What it provides is, some people call them one-hop proxies, whereby the VPN connectivity from an enterprise goes out to...
Oh, sorry, this one was for Ara.
Okay.
Ara, are you on mute?
No, can you hear me?
Okay, got you.
But yeah, Tom, you can finish your thought on that. No, I definitely. I'm like zoned into.
No, that's fine. So where it will swap IP addresses. So the IP address of the enterprise may not be seen, but the IP address of the device is still seen, or vice versa. So unless you have a system in place that is sole purpose to eliminate those IP addresses, then you still have vulnerabilities.
Got it.
And
sorry for cutting you off there.
No worries.
And actually, Tom, I have a follow-up question for those of us who are not as tech savvy. How would you define obfuscation? So what is network obfuscation?
Sure. So to obfuscate a network means that you vary network pathways between source and destination. So with a typical VPN, going back to that discussion, there's a single point-to-point connection through the internet. Again, it's encrypted, TLS type encryption, a single layer, but it is a point-to-point network. Network obfuscation provides the ability to vary network pathways between a source, whether that's a user logging on from a device, or whether it's a physical device that's always connected to the internet or always connected to the network. It will pass through an obfuscation network that varies the network pathways, that goes through multiple virtual nodes, whereby source and destination IP addresses between those nodes are eliminated, and network pathways vary, so that the idea is to create a highly dynamic environment from a networking perspective that eliminates the ability for a cyber adversary to identify any activity within that environment. It's just too hard for them. They go elsewhere. They go to a VPN where it's easier.
So you basically, and because that's something that's very important, especially when we're dealing with the technology that we're talking about with gun detection, because you do have a physical presence with the cameras on location, and then you have cloud-based processing that's happening. And I know we at Elmhurst University, we had discussions with the IT folks, because this privacy is a major concern, and ensuring that privacy is not breached by some sort of external actor, since there is access to the internet. And so by making that connection completely invisible is one way is probably the best way to mitigate that concern, right?
To privatize the public internet is one aspect of that. To privatize the entire connection. So if you have a cloud-based repository or an on-premise based repository where these images and analytics are performed, the exit out of this network obfuscation capability can go directly into that on-premise enclave or cloud-based enclave, completely hiding both the source and the destination.
Got it. And
again, it's all about making sure that these critical capabilities that Omnilert provides to folks like Marc, who's trying to protect everyone that comes onto his campus, is absolutely critical that those systems remain active, that attack vectors are eliminated, so that when they're needed, they're there to do what they're designed to do, right?
So there's kind of two questions here that I might mesh together. The first one is, bottom line, is how do you detect gun violence in the workplace? Is there a visual tool to detect it? So I might combine that with the one that I had mentioned earlier, which is, do I need specific cameras? So maybe you can answer that in both ways.
You want me to answer that? Okay. So first of all, you're leveraging your existing camera system. So, whatever infrastructure you have, obviously the better the cameras, the better the detections. If you have a 1998 analog camera, it's got to be an IP-based camera. I was at the bank earlier today, and they still had probably from 89 or something like that. But anyhow, so IP, all you need is IP-based cameras, and it detects as soon as a firearm is presented. Like I mentioned, it detects the firearm, and then it detects the motion, range of motion, and then it will send a video and an image of the detection to any predefined set of group of users. So let's say Marc, Tom, and Rich and I are in the loop. We verify that this is a threat, and then we could initiate a lockdown or any other predefined series of actions that we decide to utilize. So scenic way of saying, use your existing camera system. You put a server on the network, and it's monitoring, and it will notify you if a firearm is detected.
Okay, and then I'm feeling there might be some bias in the answers on this next one, but anyone feel free to chime in. What AI do you recommend for CCTV monitoring?
Well, of course, Omnilert's AI. I'm not sure the with the question, but yeah, I mean, we have our own neural network AI technology, constantly learning every day, every hour, every minute. But yeah, I'm not sure if there are any other opinions on that. But
Yeah, I will say, just for the benefit of this particular attendee, the second part of that, I noticed you asked about Milestone. I will tell you that Milestone is a product that we use on our campus. And I won't get into recommendations or defamations, but it is a product that we've been using for years on our campus, and it provides, fundamentally the services we need, and it seems to be able to align appropriately with gun detect.
Okay, great. And then does it work or connect with other security systems on the campus? So I guess integrations is definitely a topic that I hear about a lot.
that's critical, and that's also one of the things I mentioned. Zero Now, this new industry organization that actually all the folks on here are going to be a part of. But having interoperability and standards across different safety technologies is absolutely critical. In this instance, it sounds like they're asking like Omnilert. Yeah, Omnilert works with a number of different technologies, different platforms. It's not just notifications; it's also AI, OT, Internet of Things. So IP-based access control systems, alarm systems. I mean, it's not just notifications. It's utilizing all of the different technology endpoints.
All right, I think I only have one more here, and it looks like we're coming up on time anyways. But it sounds like the audience must love you all, because it says, how can we get them to come to our campus? How do we provide training opportunities, to our community? So, anyone feel free to answer that one, or maybe even to recommend other folks that, I know, Ara, you mentioned Navigate 360 and Brandon Rohn, who does quite a bit of training. But if anyone wants to weigh in on getting some subject matter experts coming to their campus and speaking with their people.
I guess from the Omnilert and gun detect perspective, the Omnilert website, you contact them, right? And from the cybersecurity integration with physical devices and so on, you can get to any of us through the Telos website. And Ara and I will be working very closely together to ensure that these solutions are integrated to provide this capability. So Ara and I are talking all the time. So to contact either one of us, we can get to you and take next steps.
Well, and before I want to share a thought about that, but curious, like with Rich and Mark, I mean, so where do you learn about the latest and greatest in technology, training programs, best practices? I mean, where do you learn about that?
Yes, all of the above. So, I mean, when there are conferences, Zoom meetings, just talking to different vendors, hearing about new products. But I think, the biggest thing that I see is that ability to create those groups, a focus group within an organization, that has policy and training, specific roles and responsibilities. How do you make that determination? A technology committee that has some outside input of the organization. So, this all helps in that buy-in process. And, it's the wisdom of crowds. I don't know if you've read the book, but it just talks about people that have, different perspectives can find solutions, because, technology is great, but there's also a cost and a budget, and there's a criticality to it. And how do you match those? Who's going to sponsor it? What's the ROI? How do you move it forward? So, the maturity of current technology, where it's going to go, Is there a path to the future with the technology? So I look at all of that information. And when I work with groups, for example, even developing committees, developing communication and leadership and those type of things within an organization so that they can make a succinct decision and enact based on a, analysis of availability of, resources and technologies and, get the buy-in on that and move it forward. Because everything sounds great, but you've got to be able to make the case for it.
I think for me, it's really similarly. It's if you're like me, you get 100 emails a day with a new product that's come out, and everybody's got something new to whistle on it. The reality is that I don't have the time to go through all of those emails and evaluate each service and product individually. But I think again, and this sounds kind of I lost my wording there, but I'm not trying to necessarily impress upon people how important this particular product is. But I think the reality is that you have to have different minds coming together in those security team committees to look at different products. The reality is that you have IT professionals out there that are getting courted by different entities. You already have relationship with vendors and security products that are already out there. Do you know what they do? Are you maximizing their capabilities? The reality is that in our own evaluation of our services here on campus, we found that we had a lot of products. We were not using them to their maximum capability. And you've got to take the time to learn about what you already have. We learned that Omnilert had so much more to offer to us than we were using. And it really just came down to the relationship I have with my representative to be able to say, these are the products you offer. These are the products we have. These are the different vendors we have. How do we streamline these services? How do we maximize our budgets? And then also I'd say you need to reach out to those circles that you're a part of. We have a local law enforcement, campus law enforcement association, and many of us are kind of swimming up the same stream, and we have some of the same issues and problems that we're facing. And so I'd say relationship building externally with people that are in your positions in other locations who may already have some of these products. And frankly, I'd say 50% of it comes from external entities that I have partnerships with on campus, and the other 50% are people that are on other campuses who are facing the same issues, have already done all the research, and they're able to point us in the right direction. And that's one of the things we've been so proud of with our relationship with Omnilert is many of the questions that were posed here today for gun detect, we asked as well. We aren't blindly following these products to wherever they lead. We're asking the questions about privacy and integration and operational operability on our campus with our camera systems, with using Milestone, those types of things. So you guys are asking the right questions. The reality is that you have to just reach out and have those conversations with the people who have the knowledge base.
And just one final thought before I wrap things up, Elizabeth. In response to that question, and thanks, Rich and Mark, and that's to your point about the collective wisdom. So I mentioned we're in the process of forming this new industry organization called Zero Now, and this is really we're calling it collective impact. This is a collective impact of industry and education, safety leaders working together to collaborate to come up with better solutions for safety to prevent harm. And one of the programs that we're going to be rolling out is our regional safety roundtables, where we do discuss challenges. What are some challenges? And we talked earlier about how few conferences are up in the Chicago area. We have to have maybe Elmhurst University will host the first roundtable with campuses and schools in the region. But let's talk about those issues and how can we collaboratively solve those challenges and fill the gaps that are not being met right now, because we're far from being perfect. We're far from getting to zero harm on campus, and that's what we need to do together, rather than you've got companies and you've got customers and that whole model. We need to flip that on its head and actually work together to collaborate to come up with those solutions and leverage the collective wisdom that Rich was talking about. And hopefully that's a resource. That is a resource to, for other education safety leaders to learn about what is available, what is that roadmap into the future, and how do we travel that road together rather than independently. And I'll get off my soapbox.
No, exactly. I mean, that's 100% correct. And through all that communication, it really starts to build up trust. And it's like anything else. If you were to buy, if you were to purchase a product, you're going to ask people that you trust and that you know, or the word of mouth of somebody that you trust. So I think, when you take a look at Omnilert or Telos, these are companies for me that have developed a high level of trust. And I think that's critical as you move forward. Do you have a partner when the going's going to get tough? Because it will.
We'll get you that gift card.
No, but it's true.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for adding that, and thank you to all of our panelists for spending time with us today, and for our audience as well. And if you need any other additional information on anything we discuss, please feel free to reach out directly to the contacts that are now listed on the screen. And also, please feel free to join us for some of our future webinars. Keep your eyes peeled, because I'm sure we will have some other joint webinars coming up down the line. And thanks again, and hope you have a great day.